Okay, go ahead.
Let's start at the beginning of the beginning. And maybe that is related to your first question here of you always wanted to be a talk show host? Since how old?
Oh God, I mean, since I was 4 years old, I knew what they were. The short of that is, I broke my nose when I was 4, wound up in a hospital getting it fixed, and was up super late at night in the room, and Johnny Carson came on, and I didn't know who Johnny Carson was. I just saw this older guy, and all these people were coming down, all dressed up fancy, sitting down talking to him, and the audience is laughing. And I thought, that's cool. Whatever that guy, and I didn't give it another thought for several years, but along the way, in first grade, I wrote a story for a class, like like a writing exercise. And I wound up getting, the teacher liked it so much. It was like a 26-page story. I was like 6 years old. I mean, granted, these are like big lines, 3 or 4, lines per page, but everybody else did 2 or 3 pages. Mine was 26 pages about a talking dog and cat on a crime spree and how they're outwitting the humans. And my teacher loved it so much, they sent me to read it in front of the classes of the 1st through 4th grade at St. Edward's Catholic School in Little Rock, Arkansas. So I was like doing a stand-up comedy tour at age 6. And after that, I had such a great reaction from people, I was hooked. So I would write funny essays, sometimes even without an assignment, and just say, hey, can I go read to everybody again? And they would send me out. And about once a month, I would do funny essays and tell funny stories in front of classes. And
so you were doing stand-up in the 4th grade?
That was starting in 1st grade, really. 1st through 4th grade.
Okay, let me stop you right now. Can I stop you for just a second? I know we're recording, but the painting behind you is tilted at a weird angle and like projecting out of your head. So I don't know if you want to remove that from the wall and just have a blank wall behind you, because the camera is looking at it at a weird angle.
I don't know what to do because it's attached to the wall really firmly, and I don't know why it shows up at such a weird angle. It's fine on the wall. I don't know how else to alter my.
Are you looking at a laptop?
Yes, I am.
Okay, can you put the laptop up on a couple of books so it's more level?
Yeah, it's already on a book, but hang on.
I'm just get another. This is book. Stuff like I want to work on this with you right now because you're doing a bunch of interviews that I know later when you're editing it.
How's this?
That's much better.
Oh, really?
Much better.
Great.
And then can I put one more book underneath it?
Yeah.
Do you have 2 books? All right.
Yep. Yes, I'm literate, Jake.
I know. Come on. I'm going for a joke here. Come on. It was a cheap joke. I know, but.
I know it's Arkansas. How's that?
So, okay. Now I want you to tilt it down a little bit so that you're a little level. So tilt the camera. There you go. Now, that's so much better. I don't know if that's underwear.
I've done so many shows.
Okay, so that's so much better. And then, so when you're thinking about your response, and I know you got your, neurological issue, I know you like to kind of look away, but try to find a dot on the screen to look at or look away so that at least your face is framed correctly.
Okay.
And then, because when you go, I do the same thing. You can tell always when someone's recalling a story or making something up because their eyeballs will go sideways for a second.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing of just trying to like keep the chin up, keep the face forward, even if you need to, for whatever reason, like your eyes need to go somewhere to like recall the tale. And then never have your hand in front of your mouth. You'll notice none of Johnny Carson's guests ever did that because they were trained.
Okay. Well, should I do that answer over then, or what?
No, you're fine because you're gonna edit a ton of. You're gonna have way more stuff than you can put in the doc.
Well, I'm about to get to where the real talk show influence came in.
Okay.
Okay, so where I really fell in love with talk shows, I was in the 4th grade, and I was homesick one day, and I turned on the TV was on, and David Letterman, who I didn't know from Adam at the time, had a morning show. And it was the funniest, weirdest thing. He had Larry Bud Melman on it. And that was a famous sidekick character from his late night show. Wow. And he would do things, all sorts of goofy stunts throughout the show. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And so I actually strategized that I would pretend to be sick about every 3 weeks. I figured I could get away with it, and I could stay home and watch the show, because this is 1980, before VCRs. So my one shot at watching this, it was that getting to stay home sick and checking it out, And so I was like completely in awe of this guy. And the show only lasted about 6 months. But then a couple of years later, he hits late night TV, and I watched that religiously. And I had purple bags under my eyes at age 11 or 12, because I would go to bed, set an alarm secretly, wake up at 11:30 p.m., watch the show for an hour every day, and then make it back to bed and try to make it to school in the morning. And that probably started my sleep disorders doing that. But I was hooked on that and Saturday Night Live. Every night I would watch something late at night just set an alarm and wake up and go with it.
Wow, you were smarter than me. I always tried to stay up for Saturday Night Live, and I'd make it through the cold opening and maybe the first skit. I'd try to make it to the first musical break. But for me, that was 120 Minutes, which was a show on MTV that started at midnight and went to like 2 a.m. It's just so funny that mine was always the music video, which kept me as a television rebel. But for you, it was David Letterman. What was it about Johnny Carson and David Letterman, looking back, that you so identified with?
Well, with Johnny Carson, it was I like the idea that he could talk to anybody and was making them all laugh. And that with he was like a cool cat, like the coolest grandfather figure. And I never got to know my grandfathers. They both passed long before I was born. So that was I gravitated to watching this older guy who's really funny, who sort of filled that kind of spot for me. And then with Letterman, it was just mind blowing to me. He did so many crazy stunts with, I don't know, throwing himself in a Velcro suit up against a sticky wall.
Oh, I remember that. The dwarf tossing.
Yeah.
That was hilarious. Okay.
Or he sent he without warning a Jamba Juice across the street from his studio. He once had like 35 guys dressed as Superman go in one at a time and order Jamba Juice. And then when right as he gets to 35 guys and they're pushing the fire code beyond belief, he then sends in a Spider-Man at random. It was just stuff like that. It was amazing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So what I want you to do is find a way to sit so that your shoulders are back and your back is straight and you're up.
How's that?
And then instead of looking at the screen or trying to make eye contact with my face, because I know your neurology doesn't work that way, look at fix your eyes on the camera so that it looks like you're looking the audience in the eye, when in fact you're staring off into space and doing your special thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I want you to pick up your chin. Your face looks so much better in the lighting when your face is up and your shoulders are back.
Okay.
All right. No, it's good, because I want you to remember these for your other interviews. Okay.
Yeah.
So you got into like talk radio, and you had a friend, Mike something, who.
Yeah, Mike Nagami. Basically, I worked many years later as arts editor of a weekly newspaper called Pasadena Weekly in Pasadena, California. It's a suburb of LA. And Mike Nagami was our accountant. And I don't know how we realized that we could make each other crack up so much. But I had a responsible job at this paper. He had a responsible job. He was vice president of finance for like a 10 newspaper company. But he would listen to talk radio all day, to this LA version of Howard Stern named Tom Likas. And he would always send me notes on the company email system, just making wisecracks about, you won't believe what Likas just said about this or that. And then we would trade jokes about that news item. And he finally told me, Carl, we're funnier, or as funny at least, as these guys that are on radio. We should be
Yeah.
doing this. And so he challenged me to find a way to do radio. And what I found, I don't remember how I came across it, but there was a business called American Radio Network, ARN, on Sunset Boulevard, sort of near Western. It's across from the 99-cent store for anybody who knows LA.
Oh yeah, it's a blasted wilderness out there in East Hollywood.
Yeah, it's a real divey
the asphalt
neighborhood.
desert.
Yeah. So it has this weird, long, nondescript 2-story brick building. And in the building, you go there and they have a bunch of little booths with ancient audio equipment. The business has renamed itself because LA Weekly newspaper did an expose on how shady and backwards they are. But for us, it was all we needed because we were determined to make it happen. And it was either that or spend thousands of dollars on real radio school, which I didn't have and which Mike didn't have the time for, being married with a new baby and with a really responsible job. And so what we did, I wasn't sure if Mike and I alone could be funny enough, because Mike being an accountant, I knew that he knew what funny was and he could be funny sometimes, but I wasn't sure if we had enough spark together. So I roped in this guy in our sales department that was always wisecracking and always seemed dangerous, and that it was always bragging to me outside the office how much he would just get high and sleep while pretending to be on sales calls. And so this guy's name was Jake Belcher. And Jake Belcher,
oh my God,
was I asked him, would you do radio with us? So he joins us, and the three of us started. We took like one class at the school, and it was just so limited, the training. But just we're sent into a booth with a tape recorder of all. Or not tape recorder, with a cassette tape, and you were supposed to record up to a half hour of whatever you wanted, and then they claim that you hand them the tape and they screen it, make sure that you're progressing. That's how you would learn whether you were getting good at it. I doubt anybody ever really listened to all these tapes because there were tons of people doing these classes.
Yeah.
But they claimed that the best tapes were cleared for airplay on really low power but legitimate radio stations that this company owned. So I have no idea if we ever made the airwaves. They claimed we did, but we held on to those tapes always. Jake Belcher still has them, and eventually we thought, hey, we've become pretty funny at this. We're good at like making each other laugh for 30 minutes every Saturday. We learned how to do some sound effects and add in commercials. We thought, well, what do we do next? And there was no clear path to getting on radio. We were the second largest market in America. And normally you have to work your way up for years at small cities to even get a dream of getting in a big city like LA. So what we did was, at first, I don't even know if we had an intention of where this could go, because this is before, at the dawn of YouTube, maybe even before YouTube.
Can you give me a year? Give me
2008.
2008. So it's just because like 2000, when did the iPhone came out in like what, 04, 05?
Yeah.
And then so the podcast was a concept that iTunes and iPhone were, because the iPod. Remember the podcast came out with iPod, which was maybe earlier. So yeah, you're in the super early days. So podcasting is just something that nerds in the Valley were wanking off to, but nobody in Los Angeles would have given that the time of day. So yeah. An interesting thing I want to point out is just that you guys were being schooled in the old ways of doing things, but also kind of seeing that the school was sort of a joke and that there was no clear career path. It was a very crowded field with very few outlets. And so unless you were, a sexy reporter who could sleep with the programming director, you had no chance of getting on the radio in LA, or at least in the traditional view.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you were right there at the dawn of the podcasting age there's a sales guy and an accountant. There's nobody who's a tech nerd on this team. You guys just wanted to be funny.
Yeah. Well, Jake took on the tech stuff. He wasn't a tech nerd before, I don't think, but just by default, I just am terrible with tech. Mike was
Don't tell
able to
yourself
just
that. What is it about that story? No, you're great at tech.
okay.
You just haven't
All right.
practiced.
Okay. But Mike didn't have the bandwidth personally to do anything other than the half hour on Saturdays and then see if we landed anywhere. Okay, so Jake handled that. And the thing is that what we did without even knowing where it could go, we just thought, where can we do some odd talk shows? And this is where the spirit of Letterman came in. So I wound up, first we did a show for an hour at the House of Pies, my favorite diner in Los Feliz. And basically we went in with a tape recorder, the three of us, with a couple of comedians, I forget who, and we just had a funny conversation for an hour with our waitress interrupting at various points. And people were looking at us like, what are these guys doing? We're having these uproarious conversation and a giant tape recorder's in the middle of the table. And so then secondly, we went to a comedian named Butch Bradley's apartment. And Butch was just a friend of mine who was funny, up and coming at the Comedy Store. And I said, hey, can we try doing a talk show at your apartment? And he's interviewed elsewhere in this documentary talking about how he thought we were crazy. Like, why do you want to come over to my apartment and record a talk show? Who does that? And he says, now looking back, he's like, you guys were like cutting edge, way ahead of your time, because that's what everybody does for podcasts now.
This is pre-Joe Rogan.
Oh yeah,
right?
this
That's
is
the
totally
thing.
yeah. This is
before Joe, BJ.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
BJ, yeah. And so then thirdly,
I thought I'd put that past you.
What we did last was I thought, let's do a talk show on the bus.
Right.
And there was this bus driver named James Barry, this like big boisterous black dude who would drive overnights from Hollywood to Pasadena and back. And I would ride that bus several nights a week in order to get home to Pasadena because I had my sleep disorder. I couldn't drive. And I would go to Hollywood for comedy stuff. And I would ride this bus, and he treated it like a party on wheels. The dude, you're supposed to, as a bus driver, keep everybody quiet and don't show any personality, and make all the people get off the bus at the end of each line, part of the route. Like get off in Pasadena and get back on if you have to pay, or get off in Pasadena. And what he would do is, his rules, as he says in another interview here, was
you got him.
I tracked him down. It's amazing.
Oh my gosh, that's precious. And then did you get a hold of Mike Nagami?
Yes, Mike Nagami's got an amazing interview.
Okay, great.
Okay, I have not talked to either of those guys since 2008, and I found them for this.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so what happened was we get on the bus, and JB's only rules were you can't stink and you can't be like really disruptive, like confrontational with other travelers. Other than that, he would let you sleep on the bus all night long, wouldn't throw people off. He'd stop at Hooters, call ahead at Hooters in Pasadena, pull up the bus on Colorado Boulevard for like
I'm sorry. Minute. That's the most genius show idea I've ever heard.
I know.
I remember thinking, because like Santa Cruz, California has like being on the bus late at night in certain parts of California is one of the most bizarre experiences you will ever endure. But I love that there's a bus driver out there who rolled with it and created this space that was had creative energy for you.
Well, he did that regularly, pulling up at Hooters, and the waitress would hop on board the bus. The guys would go crazy applauding her. She'd hand him a bucket of chicken wings. He'd give her $20. Then he'd pass the chicken wings all over the bus. And I mean, I swear to God. And then like in Hollywood and Cahuenga, he'd pull up the bus outside the 7-Eleven and tell everybody you had 10 minutes to get whatever you wanted. So there'd be 15 or 20 of us guys with nothing better to do, or homeless guys. We'd jump off the bus, run to the 7-Eleven, buy our snacks. So I knew this was a place to do a talk show.
This is
and
genius.
I knew that
Oh my God! Why didn't you tell me that earlier? This was genius. I mean,
Okay.
that is the
Well,
greatest episode of Carl. Carl. It's Carl.
okay.
And the bus driver. Oh my God! It's like
Well, wait till you hear what we did.
Oh
It
my
gets
God!
better.
Yeah.
Okay, so JB would let everybody buy stuff, get back on the bus. Okay, so this I knew that JB would be an awesome Paul Schaefer, David Letterman's sidekick.
Right.
And so what we
Ed
did was
McMahon.
I said, JB, we're gonna hop on a Friday night. Me and my two friends, we're going to have a tape recorder. We're gonna sit like we're gonna jump on at the start of your route in Pasadena. We're gonna sit directly behind you at the closest seats. We're gonna hog a couple extra seats. And this was amazing, the precision we did this with. This will blow your mind.
Yeah.
We arranged for, I forget who, but again, it was a couple of comics that were on their way up, decent Comedy Store reputation named comics. And they
got on the bus at various stops.
to get on at different stops.
Right.
So they had to be at the Glendale Galleria at 10:45, or they would miss their opportunity. So we would say, and ladies and gentlemen, here's for example, making up the real guy, but I'm not sure if it was him, Sam Tripoli, and we would get the entire bus to applaud as this guy gets on the bus. And so then we also had 4 friends, including my British sidekick, who's also in this. Alan Turner Ward was my best friend at the time. And we would have them sit around us. We took over basically the first 10 or 12 seats of the bus. And Alan and these 3 other people, they were our studio audience who were applauding the whole time and laughing louder. And then the rest of the bus was very confused people that were progressively got more either annoyed or entertained as the night went on. But we did this all the way to Pasadena to Hollywood and then back again. And we had no idea what we were going to do with it. And you want to know what's amazing is that 5 or 6 years later, he didn't rip us off because there's no way he could have known we did this. But Jimmy Kimmel staged an episode of his show on board an LA City bus. But the thing about his show, as much as I love Jimmy, that was bogus because it was obviously rented the bus. It wasn't the guerrilla style energy we had, where it was really happening. And you were really getting on board a bus with a talk show. I mean, Jimmy, it was like pre-planned audience got to sit there, 20
for
people,
insurance purposes,
and politely applaud throughout and laugh throughout. But we did the real deal.
Take a break, Carl. But one of the things with their storytelling, I want you to kind of is chunk it up as much as you can. This is another thing of editing in the camera, where give yourself breaks to cut.
Yeah.
So say something. Don't feel bad that you're taking a moment to think or collect your thoughts, because that's going to give you a great place to cut this. Don't underestimate. Of course, obviously, we're not going to accuse Jimmy Kimmel of stealing, but I've noticed that word travels fast in that town with comedians. You know, there's a robust ecosystem of stealing each other's jokes. And for the most part, there's nothing wrong with that because it's a brilliant concept. How could you not do that? And it's sort of like Pee-wee's Playhouse, where you sort of pretend that the guest is, it's a surprise guest, you know what I mean? And it's, Cowboy Curtis is, of course, Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah, Pee-wee's Playhouse was definitely a big influence on me also.
Right, and so you stole it from, but in the thing, you put it on a bus. And of course, when a big studio has to do it, they have to rent a bus and it's fake because of insurance reasons or whatever. And that was the beauty of podcasting, was the equipment was so lightweight that you were able to do a sort of guerrilla broadcast like that. You could record in guerrilla environments, and that it's extremely creative. Word must have gotten out, because you know how comedians are. When they have a fun experience, they tell everybody about it. And writers are hungry for ideas. And that's just how it works. It's just great ideas will circulate and rise to the top of the pond. So
I was also kind of known. I also was very known in the LA scene as being narcoleptic. And so Jimmy Kimmel himself is a narcoleptic who also has successfully found treatment. Like, now I'm fine. For the record, everybody, employers, etc., don't worry. But the thing is that Jimmy, he has narcolepsy. And so I wouldn't be surprised if I was somehow on his radar anyway, like comics talking about, hey, there's some other dude who's got narcolepsy too. And then the other thing was, I met his son. I don't know, it was probably after the bus, I'm almost definite, but I met Jimmy's son who worked for the show at the time, once on Hollywood Boulevard, and we hit it off really well. And I wrote him a letter asking him, hey, would you let your dad know there's another narcoleptic comedian? And I never heard anything further, but I'm just saying that I got on the kid's radar. We made him laugh for an hour, and he gave me a legit email that didn't bounce back. So who knows?
Well,
but I think
you remember how wasn't it Jimmy Kimmel who was behind the San Gennaro festival,
yes,
moving to Hollywood, and we were all up in that. So you're literally 1 degree of separation from pretty much all the comedy in Hollywood.
Well, I also fell asleep on his show one time in 2003. I went to the studio audience, and it was amazing. He goes to commercial, and I'm in the crowd surrounded with a live band cranking away, hundreds of people laughing around me. It's like 50 degrees because all these studios are super cold to keep you awake.
Right.
And I still managed to
fall
fall
asleep. No sweating under the lights.
Yeah. And I wound up falling asleep anyway. And I woke up to this huge cascades of laughter. My eyes pop open, and there's a camera in my face. And the guy's like, no, like, don't move, don't mess this up. And then Jimmy goes, wow, I didn't realize I'm that off tonight. And so I actually had a narcoleptic episode on the Jimmy Kimmel show.
And I think you have another couple stories like that. Wasn't there like a play or a one-man play or something you fell asleep in the middle of, and it was somebody famous who was
I can't remember who, but things like that happen. I once saw, I really want to get back to the main story in a second, but I once saw Sleepwalk with Me, which was an off-Broadway show with Mike Birbiglia that became huge. And I sat purposely in the back row in a corner in case I would fall asleep. And I did nod out a couple times on another comedian's show about sleep.
Oh, but I remember anyway, it was I'm sorry to interrupt, but it was it was one of those shows you were supposed to review, and it was a famous play.
Oh, and that happened a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, you were right in the front row. Yeah, so
that happened with John Mahoney in Chicago from Cheers. I was reviewing Long Day's Journey into Night, aptly named title for Long Day's Journey into Falling Asleep, and I was in the special critics seat in the third row. And John Mahoney from Cheers and Frasier fame was on stage, and I started snoring so loud that when I finally got shaken awake, he was on the edge of the stage looking down at me and goes, "Are you finished?" And I was wide awake for the rest of the show. And he canceled the interview. They told me Mr. Mahoney has left the building. He refused the interview.
So yeah, let's do all your narcolepsy stories at another time. Now,
sure.
Where we're at is the Grand Theft Audio. Where did that idea come from?
So we Grand Theft Audio was a name that Jake Belcher came up with, and what happened was, right after we did all these experimental shows, we didn't know what direction we could go with things, and there was a little bit of creative differences with Mike that we don't need to get into, but Mike's bigger concern was, if he was going to do this, he wanted to do it all the way. Like, Joe Rogan was just starting then, or about to start. So there was no clear path for podcasting. And like we said, we didn't know how to get on real radio. And so he said, guys, I quit. I'll just focus on making a good living and having my family, move on, whatever. And then about a month later, we came up with the idea of calling a show Grand Theft Audio, because Jake loved Grand Theft Auto, the video game. And we had this idea of trying. We met a guy named Baltazar Fedelizo, a great name. And Baltazar Fedelizo was a guy that I met. I did an article on him for the Pasadena Weekly, and it was about his business. And the article got him 100 clients. And he called the paper and he goes, "Holy crap, dude, I owe you. Whatever you want, I owe you." And so what we did was we found out that you could buy time on KABC radio, the ABC radio station in LA. And so for 1 a.m. on Friday nights, you could get an hour for $1,000 an hour. And so I told Baltazar, can you buy us some airtime? And Baltazar handed me a check for $4,000. And we bought 4 weeks of airtime on KABC. Wow. And we were so good right away at it. And we were getting good guests right away because I knew all sorts of people in comedy. And everybody's like, whoa, you're on real radio. They didn't care it was 1 a.m. We may not have even told them it would be 1 a.m. We were taping in advance. But I remember we taped it with a guy named Jay Davis, who's also been interviewed for this. We did our first episode on the day after the election in 2008. I opened the show because I'm a conservative Republican. I opened the show to Flight of the Valkyries music was building. And I did a rant about how America was going to be destroyed because Obama won, which is absurd. I came to like Obama term number 2. But anyway, it was this big epic opening. And I timed it perfectly, this rant, like to right where it might have been Carmina Burana. That's what it was. It was like, da, 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 da. And I'm like going, and now this is America's last chance. We are Grand Theft Audio. And it goes, da, 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 da. And we have the audio of this still in our archives. We're going to find it. And it was just a mind-blowing way to start. And the sound guy whose studio we were paying to use, his eyes just popped out of his head. He was like, whoa. And he remembers us to this day, like loves hearing from us, saying that was the most inventive show he ever had record, even though we only did 4 weeks with him. And so at the end of 4 weeks, Baltazar understandably wouldn't keep paying that much money. And so we had to give up on KABC, even though we had taken their ratings from 13,000 listeners in that time slot before we took over. Within a month, we raised the audience to 31,000. And they said, if you guys can get 50,000, if we could keep growing to that, they would pay us to do the show. But we just didn't have that money to bridge it, to stick around long enough to see if we could grow. So it was then that we heard about podcasting. And there was this thing called LA Talk Radio that it was a studio in the Valley. And this guy named Sam Hassan was had 2 nice little studio rooms. You could come in, record shows, and he would post them on a schedule on a website with 2 channels, so you could have lots of shows. And we came in there, and it was a great place to start doing podcasting because it was very classy, nice environment. And right off the bat, we had some mega people come in. And I'll never forget, our 3rd episode, we had the former bass player of Korn, K-O-R-N, the major metal band. And then Brian Head Welch had gone Christian, even though he was still doing really loud rock. And I found out that he was coming to town, had a book to promote. And I had access to all these publicists because of my newspaper job. So I said, oh my God, we love Brian Head Welch, even though I was not even a Korn fan. I just knew it'd be a great get. And so I BS'd my way into convincing the publicist to have Brian show up and do an episode of our show before playing the Whiskey a Go-Go that night. Wow. And we thought he would just show up in a car, right? No, Brian showed up in a giant mega tour bus that took up half of Ventura Boulevard and pulled into our tiny little parking lot. And Sam's freaking out, the owner, going, what is this? Why is there a giant tour bus blocking everything in sight? And we're like, oh yeah, that's our guest. And it was after that, all bets were off. We had everybody who was anybody pretty much, in comedy especially, in music sometimes actors, but it was always comedy. And a big time screenwriter named Shane Black was a regular for us also. He was the writer of Lethal Weapon. And so we just did this amazing thing for a year with all these famous people coming through. And at the end of a year, we decided to move on, though. We went to a new platform called New Dissonant Radio.
Okay, just take a break.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whenever you're going
yeah.
to try to continue the story, you're making it hard for you to cut and edit later.
You're right. Yeah.
Stop.
Okay.
Take a breath. Correct your posture.
Yeah.
And then go on, because that's a whole other bullet item.
It is. Yeah.
So at LA Talk Radio, was it just too much? Why did you end up going to Johnny Dam's apartment after being in such a nice place?
LA Talk Radio, yeah, Johnny Dam was offering a cheaper price. LA Talk Radio, I think if I recall correctly, I may be wrong, but that the bigger the audience you got, the more they would charge. And that's understandable to a point. And we were growing and getting more and more listeners. And so, but we didn't have the money to keep it going on a bigger and bigger cost level. So Johnny Dam says, hey, come to my place. I'm going to start this studio in my apartment. It's at Franklin and La Brea, and I'll only charge $200 a month, and come do it there. And so we wind up in his
Stop.
Yeah.
Take a breath. Complete a thought. You don't have to keep rambling to keep the audience's attention. Yeah. It actually works better. Again, you're editing in the camera to complete an episode, tell a thought, and then you don't have to make noise in order to keep the thing. So, it's like when you're talking in a conversation, you have to go, because it's like I'm about to say something else. Give yourself space to breathe, correct your posture, and then go on to the next thing. Because I want to, at this point, you're still working at Pasadena Weekly and sort of using your journalist accent. If we're talking over each other, it also doesn't edit out well.
Yeah.
So just let me complete the question.
Sure.
You're still working at Pasadena Weekly. You're using your journalistic access to all these publicists to then also kind of cross promote your own thing that you're doing. How did that work? Did you discover there was synergy, or was there a conflict? Was there a little bit? Did you have any ethical concerns about what you were doing?
Okay, well, first of all, I have very few ethics.
It's Hollywood. I understand that.
Yeah. I mean, I have morals and big personal life issues, but ethics, I figure, are very flexible. As long as you're not breaking the law, I say do whatever it takes to get what you need to get. I mean, because the thing was, working at Pasadena Weekly, we were much smaller than the LA Times. We were much smaller than LA Weekly. And I always had just this, but we always had big people coming through Pasadena, though, because we had the Rose Bowl. We had a huge convention center. We had the best bookstore in the LA area, Romans. We had the Pasadena Playhouse, Legendary Theater. All these venues would attract stars. And so I was always thought, why should I write about Larry who runs the piano bar? And instead, I could be writing about some famous author showing up, or a famous musician. Oh, and America's oldest comedy club, the Ice House, was there. And so the thing was, I raised the game of the paper from just being this little community thing to, as often as possible, getting the biggest possible name that was coming through town in a week. And so all the publicists got to know me because I always delivered a good story and got their clients, these stars, good exposure that helped them sell tons of tickets or books or whatever. And so when it came to the podcasting, I had an extra feather in my quill or whatever, or bow in my arrow or whatever they say. And what happened, arrow in my quiver. I had an extra arrow in my quiver. And what it was that I could tell these publicists, hey, if you let me have your person on as a podcast guest, I'll make that the interview that becomes the article. And so I would get bigger stars than I could ever possibly imagine to be podcast guests at the dawn of podcasting. So people were also curious. I've heard about podcasting. Yeah, I'll try that. And so they would come in and I would write the article as a result. We would win on the podcast end. the paper one on their end, because they would have these giant stars suddenly fill in their pages. And it was a great synergy.
Yeah.
I had a very supportive but comically grouchy boss named Kevin that was always complaining about, well, this is kind of self-serving, and asking me if, jokingly, if I had any ethics, and I would be like, no. Are we winning? That's what mattered. And
Yeah.
is everybody getting ahead? Yes. And so that's how it all worked out. And
It's
eventually,
not like puff pieces for advertisers. I mean, it was legitimate synergy. It sounds like.
Yeah, and also the other thing that was cool that made it so that I could never have done what I did with podcasting without that newspaper job was that because they couldn't pay well, I threatened to walk, but they wanted the stars so badly. I told them, if I walk, I'm taking all my contacts. The next person has to figure it out for themselves. And they knew nobody would ever pull that off. So they let me have a deal where I only had to be in the office Mondays, Tuesdays, and then Wednesday till 1 when we would go to press. The whole rest of the week, I technically was supposed to work from home, but in reality, I hustled, knew how to do the job in those 20 hours that I was at the office. And I had a whole half a week free to do podcasting and to chase guests and all that. And that's what paid off later on, getting to help you run Radio Titans, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. Take a breath, correct your posture. Let me get to the next question, because let's go back to New Dissident Radio with Johnny Dam. And you have, I think, a story about people reacting to doing a show in some comedian's nasty little apartment.
No, well, he actually had a nice apartment, but it was funny because people, he did.
I've seen how those people live. They're like hamsters.
No, he and his wife kept a very classy place. And anyways, the thing was that still people thought it was odd. We're talking like 2010, okay? So people were like, famous people would show up going, yeah, I'm here for the recording. I know this is an apartment, and I'd be like, oh yeah, come on in. And we'd trot through the living room and the kitchen, and the wife's watching, stuff on TV and whatever. And they're like, where's the studio? I'm like, just follow me. And we'd go into this back bedroom, and there was the studio set up, and it was legit. But what was funny especially was there was a woman comic named Paula Bell, who I adore. And she's the raunchiest person. I mean, she could give any raunchy guy comic a run for his money. And I wanted her as a guest. And I said, yeah, come on over. And I didn't think to warn her about the weird layout of the place. She was the first woman that we invited over there. It was like episode 3 of that era. And I remember she comes in and she's kind of nervous. And she's like, where are we going? And I'm like, just follow me. And I open the door and she goes, oh, thank God. I thought I was going to get gang raped. And, and I was like, really? And she goes, well, yeah. And by you? And I was like, wow. And so
right away, she's running material.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
But she sat down and she had a blast. And because we always had a sterling reputation, you included, that not once have any of us that were at least in charge of Radio Titans. There was one host that caused some problems, but nothing major. But none of us were ever accused of anything sexist or misogynist or Me Too-ish or whatever. And I'm proud of that, and she spread the word like, hey, these guys are doing this nutty thing, and hey, lady comics, it's safe to go over there. They're harmless. And so that really helped.
Stop again with the are places where you need to stop, take a breath, and let yourself cut. And also, I don't know if you want to pause or anything, but I got to run and use the bathroom. I'll be right back.
I got to take a drink of water. Okay.
Collect your thoughts. Yeah.
Okay.
Started you with the LA Times newspaper story.
All right. Let me start over from that to be safe.
Our code, a sentence, stop, pause, go. Okay.
Okay. All right, 1 second. Something wrong that it's not letting me.
Do you have enough memory for it to record? Do you want to quit and relaunch?
Hang
Just
on.
shut it down, turn it off, turn it back on again.
Well, we'd have to start a new meeting, I think.
Yeah. Then what you'll do after you're done with me is you're going to go in and see how your recording turned out.
All right. I'm going to stop
Don't be
recording.
impatient. Again, Carl, it's a documentary film. It's going to take a year.